Alright, so we have flattened and smoothed and raised and lowered and generally laid out our map. I have set a few location points that we can look around and see what I've done. The first one being the first one that I showed you in the video. And we will hop around a bit. And you can see I've got kind of a sheer cliff going on this side with our way up coming along here. There's the bay we were just at. And then if we hop over to the other side of the map, our little bay is on the other side of this rock. You can see I have a long path coming along the outside and winding up. And we have set a top up here. Now on this one, I did intentionally set this higher chunk here. And I want you to be sure that you do that on yours. And it won't matter how you've already got modeled out. Just pull some of that up and make sure it's at least like 3 meters higher than this. Now you can tell how that is simply by holding down Control, the flatten brush that you were using, picking this layer, and now you'll see in height it's told you what that height is. So you can bump that up to say 60, 61, something like that, and then raise this area. So that's an easy way to tell what you need to do there. And you can see in between these two, I've got them relatively close with just a little bit in between, and I made them close to the same height. A little bit off so it looks a little more natural, but close to the same height. That'll be important for this lesson also. This is where we will create our land bridge going from one to the other so that our player can go underneath. We'll be doing that using something called voxel terrain, and we'll get into that in a later lesson. But we're going to create a land bridge here, and we're going to create a cave in here. Last but not least, well, I guess not even last really, down here I did some raising and then sunk the center of it. Now it doesn't have to be right here, but I would like you to create something like this somewhere on your map. In here later we're going to put in a pool as though perhaps tides rise high enough to fill this in, something like that. Maybe it comes from a spring, doesn't matter. Basically for this lesson it's just there so that I can teach you how to create a pool or a lake or something like that. And then we will be discussing voids, which are things like birds that repeat or fish that swim around. So that's stuff for upcoming lessons. And then the very last thing, I use the raise lower tool to bring up the flat terrain along here a little bit. So we can look at that and see, we can even raise that a little bit more, doesn't matter. And I would like you to do that with your map too. We can smooth it a little bit. I don't need it to be really lumpy. I just want it to be a little higher, and there's a reason for that as well. If you'll remember, we originally had 16 meters for our ocean and 20 meters for our original height, and now this will be above that, and that's going to play into what we're going to do next, which is texturing. I could probably smooth that a little more, couldn't I? So on that note, let's get on to texturing. Now to texture, just come over into your terrain dialog, and next to that you'll see texture, which is for your terrain. We're going to bring up that window. Now you can set your first texture in here, but we'll go through adding layers just so you get some additional practice at doing it. So we're going to hit add layer. And while we're on this, we're going to go over to change layer texture, which is not the final texture that we'll be looking at. And if you're somewhere here in textures, then you're going to go terrain. I take that back. You don't want terrain, you want textures, defaults. Then we're going to scroll over here, and we're going to grab gray.dds and open that. And think of this almost like primer under paint. All of our textures will have this layer texture beneath them, and it'll help us get a very nice edge between our textures. So we've set that. Now we need to get the actual texture that we're going to use. And we'll set up all of our textures first. So we pull up our material editor, open up materials, come down to terrain, and we're going to scroll down and we're going to grab this very first one, beach white sand. And then we're just going to, over here, we're going to hit assign material. And we've got our first one. Now we're going to add another layer. And we're going to repeat this process. Grab our gray. And on this one, which one do we want? This one we're going to grab grass 1. Now, as you're looking at these, particularly if you're going to do like 2 different colors of grasses or something like that layered up, scroll down and under texture maps, look at the type of texture that each one of these, or type of map that each one of these textures has. In this case, we have a diffuse, a specular, and a bump map. And if you mouse over those, you'll see those all pop up. Now, if we went to grass 2, we see we only have a diffuse and a specular in this one. Grass 9, we only have a diffuse. But grass 5, we do have a diffuse and a bump map. So this one's closest to grass 1. So if we're going to do 2 different types, you want to try to match things up like that. We're only using 1 today, so we'll grab grass 1 and we will assign that material. And then we're going to add one more layer, change our texture to that gray, change our material. In this case, we're going to grab, where are you? Cliff next to ocean, and assign that material. Last but not least, we're going to rename these. So we can just double click on that, and we will put beach, grass, and cliff. And now we can close these out. And when we go over to our terrain editor over here, we're going to see Layer Painter. We're going to open that up, and if it opens up just like this, just also click on this one and that will open that up. Now you can see that we have all of our materials over here in our editor, and we have a couple other things that we need to do too. First of all, we need to set colors, otherwise all of these textures will come in very bleached out. And this allows you to get some color variation without changing your textures. So we'll double click on that. And for the sand, we want something kind of brownish. Something over here, bring our level down. I think that should do nicely. Click OK. Now, one of the most important things to remember, once you set this color, save the layer. Otherwise, it'll reset to white the next time you go out of it. So we're going to do this for each of our 3. We'll pick our grass. And this one will give something a little bit more of a green hue. It doesn't need a lot of color for quite a bit of color to come through because there is some color information in the texture. And we'll save that layer. And we'll go with kind of a bluish green hue. I like to try and keep kind of in the same area so that you get kind of a uniformity to your color, but you also have to take into account what the base color of the material is you're using. A lot of rock tends to be bluish, and the cliff rock that we're using certainly tends to be. So we're going to run with that. We're going to save this layer. And now we're going to go back up to beach, and we're going to do a really neat trick to get all this stuff done up really quick. Now in the case of the beach, we know that all of our sand is going to be fairly low. We also know that we set our original levels at 20. So in altitude, we're going to go 0 to 20. The slope is fine, doesn't matter what degree of slope it's at. And now we're going to come over here in the middle a little bit, look straight down, and I'm going to change my speed down here at the bottom to 10, and I'm just going to back way out. And this will be a quick way to get our texture on. We're going to go up to our brush settings. We're going to take our radius way up. And you can just crank it out at the top if you want. If you've got a bigger map, just crank it all the way out. And then we're just going to click. And when we come back down in, you can see that we've got some sand going. In a beachy area and in low-lying areas. So that's awesome. So now we're going to go back out. We're going to look at our grass. In our grass, we're going to set at a low altitude of 20, which is where our sand ends. And we're going to do a slope of degrees of 0. And let's do 30 degrees. So now it will have to be above the altitude of 20, but below the altitude of 1024. And it'll have to be on a slope that's between 0 degrees or flat and a 30-degree incline. Well, we got that, so now we'll lay that in. And you can see that coming in. And then last but not least, we're going to do our cliffs. This altitude, we're going to leave this down at 0 so that some of these edges, it doesn't turn into sand. It just stays cliff going down through the water. But we set our grass at a 30-degree slope. So we're going to change our bottom end so that this only applies between a 30 and a 90-degree slope. We'll come back in. And voila! We have textured up our terrain very quickly, and we have some nice looking things going on with it here. So that is how we get fast texture on. Now if you had some areas that you weren't particularly happy with in terms of how it looks, and this is something that you do want to go through your whole map, and I will be doing it off camera, and you want to look around. And you want to look for areas like this one right here, where the grass is, or stone, or whatever texture you're using, is looking kind of stretched. And if you get that, we're going to go back to our modify. And we're just going to smooth that a little bit. Bring your brush size way down. We'll just smooth some of that out. You can see that texture tighten up. So you want to go around your map and do that. For the purposes of this course, I'm not going to worry about mine too much, but I certainly would like you to do yours. I am wondering alrighty, I was just lost about where I was. See how this is why we set those keys, so you can do things like this and realize where you're at. I thought I was behind the wrong mountain. But you should go around and make sure that all this stuff's working out alright. Make sure your paths look okay. Particularly like right here, you can see where that's stretching a little bit. We can smooth that out. Raise, lower things as we need to. And then last but not least, make sure that you go down. I really got to change that speed back to 1. That you go down and just try it out. Control G for game. And now all of your paths and stuff just make sure that you can climb up everything. And while you're running around, you'll see areas like this that you want to come in and touch up, and that'll be great. Alright, I'll see you guys in the next video. And I nearly forgot before I went on to the next video, so I'll be tacking this on to the end of the video here. Only take a second, but once you have all of your terrain stuff textured up, you want to go up to File, Generate Surface Texture. And we were using 2048, so we'll stick with that. We're going to go ahead and let that run. Now, that will not affect how your texture looks. It will not affect how well it looks really up close or really far away. All it's doing is compressing the texture so that the engine can run these textures faster. That's all it's going to do for you. Alright, with that, I will see you guys in the next video.